How many more of these do you have?
Okay.
That's Italy? Like Italy.
Okay.
No, there. It says Italy.
My name is Shannon Rain. This is my third speech, informative speech about the causes of the Yugoslavian and the Balkan Wars. Whoever is a Serb and of Serb birth, and of Serb blood and heritage, and comes not to the battle of Kosovo, may he never have the progeny his heart desires, neither son nor daughter. May Nathan grow his hand sow, neither dark wine or white wheat. This was a Croatian folk song written and composed by Vuk Karadžić in 1895. It shows that after the initial civil war between Serbia and Kosovo that took place thousands of years earlier, the hatred and malice that was alive then was so deeply rooted within the country that the prejudices are still alive today. But in order to understand the causes of the Yugoslavian war, we need to first understand or look at the history of the war in the country. The beginning was in the Balkan Wars in the late 14th century, or more specifically 1385, in which Serbia won the civil war between them and Kosovo. As a result, Kosovo lost not only their independence and freedom to Serbia, but also their national identity as well. But as the civil war was created the country's roots and foundations of hatred, it was later through future wars that the hatreds of the country were further ingrained. Following that was World War I. It was more or less the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. So much like the rest of Europe, Yugoslavia went into a social and economic depression, in which, like any other country during any type of depression, you begin to look at reasons why so many bad things are happening to you. In a country where their hatreds were so ethnically and racially ingrained, you saw these hatreds, they just further came out within the people. And it gave further reason for hatreds and boundaries to grow and to be manipulated. So following World War I, World War II was more or less on the brink of making the country fall apart. As a result, Yugoslavia looked for a savior within itself, and they found this saving grace within the form of General Tito, and he became the new hope for Yugoslavia. During a time when the country was so divided, he was a candidate who was going to create more or less an equal opportunity for the country under the rule of communism. In these circumstances, communism was a perfect government strategy for Yugoslavia because it gave the people a way to connect socially and nationally. Everything was equal, and under communism, everybody was going to be equal as a result. But unfortunately, before he was able to take flight with communism, he died in 1980, and that resulted in the country's social and national identities to split, in which it was divided into 6 autonomous separate states, 2 autonomous regions, with one common hatred for one another. As shown on this computer screen, we see where the countries were divided, and this marks their political boundaries as well as their social boundaries as well. So, with Tito gone, the new communism that took form was war and genocide that would eventually unite the country. So as they saw no political way that they could connect, they decided to break apart into their national identities, and they thought that by killing one another, they were able to make everybody equal, and they would remain equal under this one common nationality, or under this one common social constraint. So, in order to understand why Yugoslavia got so lost in this war, we need to understand why, and part of the reason why was because of their identities, both nationally and socially. But what is the identity? Identity is thought of as a community. We need to first start to understand the whole concept of identity. You first look at what it is, and outside of it, you begin to look at the personal self. This is what every human being has when they're first born. It's the most selfish way to look at yourself because you don't see anything outside of that. But as each individual grows, we begin to look at the social self. Within the social self, you begin to form these imagined communities. So you have your family that surrounds you, the community that you live in. These are all things that begin to identify who you are. And once you grow outside of this, you next begin to form the national self. And for people of Yugoslavia, they didn't see themselves as Yugoslavians, but they saw themselves in these 6 different regions or these different nationalities. So they saw themselves as Croatians or Serbians or Macedonians. And these ethnic dividers became even more gapped apart, more or less. So once they were able to see themselves in these national identities, they begin to form these militant aggressors. And it's then that people begin to fight and die for their national identities. And it's how genocide and war was so easily doable for the people of Yugoslavia, because in order to purge the area and make it all Croatian, you had to kill everybody outside of you in order to even the playing field. So your neighbors were dying, your own family was being killed in order to make sure that everybody was the same. And it's then that the hatred within the country fuels the political strength and hostility within it. And it also creates a need to balance the ethnic demands with the state interests as a result. The next cause for the Yugoslavian wars was the need to create political boundaries that represented the social constructed self. So you no longer saw the individual, but you saw the much larger picture of what the individual was creating for the country. In this instance, the state becomes the governing force of the self, and genocide just becomes another reason that helps purge the state and creates a unified identity for the entire country. In this unified self, that the constructed self lies within the imagined community. Now that you are going out and you're purging the entire area, you're now, with the change of the environment, it's forcing others to reinvent themselves in order to survive. So even if you were not necessarily born in Croatia, people were now allying themselves with Croatians in order for their family to survive. So you're not being true to yourself, which caused an identity confusion within the country as well. As a result, there was no one reason for the Balkan Wars. These wars and hostilities took place all the way until the 1990s under the Clinton administration, in which finally, after thousands of years of war, they were able to come to a conclusion. And this conclusion was genocide. They were able to wipe out an entire race of people in order for the country to survive ethnically and socially. A large result of these wars was the ethnic differences within these nation states. Although Tito's goal of communism would have been perfect under the circumstances in order to unite a whole country, it was more idealistic rather than realistic. So, although in certain situations war is not necessarily the most positive result for a country, for Yugoslavia, it was historically, war has been a great state-building activity, which provided consolidation among the people within a political organization for peace.